Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting of the Westford Capital Planning Committee to order for Wednesday, November 29th. We have Thursday on the agenda, Dan, just so you know. It's actually Wednesday, so you didn't
Yeah, I sent a revised agenda and thank you.
Nice try. Just a reminder for everyone participating that this is being recorded. So today, pretty much the whole agenda, we're going to go through the initial recommendation of the department capital requests for fiscal year 25. So Dan's going to pull up the straw person and we'll walk through and talk about any questions anybody has on any of the items. Dan will kind of give us an overview as to everything. We are going to look for an initial vote at the end for initial recommendation for Kristen for the budget. So that's the idea. We've talked in the past about if folks have individual ones that they'd like to either abstain or vote no on, but approve the whole list. And Dan and I and Kristen are fine with that, but we'd ask that we wait till the end, that we, if there are any ones that people would like to vote on separately or pull out, we handle that at the end so we can kind of keep this efficient and moving through. We've got a pretty big group here today if there are any questions on any of the items, so we should be able to get through this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan. Dan, if you want to take it from here and we can walk through them.
Sure. So we have the initial straw person plan that was sent out a week ago. Basically, it lists all the capital items that were requested during this process. In the first section, I'm going to pull this up and share my screen. In the first section here, we have all the items that are recommended to be funded through free cash. Kristen and I went through this, and these are the items that we thought were fit for this category. At the bottom, you'll see a total of 2.717 million. That's a little bit high given our free cash standing and some of the issues we've had with our health insurance trust. So we want to try to trim that down to about 2.2 million would be a good target. Overall, the DPW had 17 requests. So we asked them to kind of take a look at those and rank those. So when we get to those, we'll have Steve kind of walk us through that. We do have a lot of capital funded through other means, with the biggest item being the PFAS treatment plans from the water enterprise. Then at the bottom, we have a couple of requests earmarked for bonding in the budget. So we're going to start from the top, I think, and just kind of go through item by item. If anybody has any questions, we have the department heads here. Feel free to speak up and raise your hand, and we can try to address those questions. So we'll start with technology. We have Mike Wells here. We have the school computer renewal plan for $398,000, we'll say. And we have the town computers for $50K.
Dan, you can call them out if you want. If you're going through, why don't you call them?
You got it. Christina.
Thanks. Mike, I'm sorry I don't have the details in front of me, but I thought I saw iPads listed on the school computer renewal. Is that correct?
Gosh, it's been a while since I looked at the detail sheet, but yes, I think you're right. I think there were a few. We use the iPads in the classrooms at the very early grades, and we have a commitment to maintain, I think it's 3+1 in each classroom, 3 for the students and 1 for the teacher in each location. And although they do last a long time, they do eventually need to be replaced. So I think that's probably true.
I think that was, I know we had a discussion maybe last year, year before, about iPads, and I just couldn't remember what what going forward we were gonna, what our plan was going to be as far as replacement, because I know a lot of them we got through grants and things like that, right, and kind of just shifted that around. So yeah,
so I think a couple of years ago we took a whole sort of a look at that and said, what do we have, what do we need, where are the machines we have? And because of course there was a terrible inequity, because different parent teacher organizations in different schools had funded their machines, and some schools had lots and some had none. So we sort of said, what's the basic need for the curriculum? That's what we'll commit to support, and that's what we're doing. If you have more than that and they age out, we're not going to help.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that the number that was in there followed that plan that we had discussed in the last couple of years, and it sounds like it.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Heather?
When we spoke about the school computers last time, I expressed concerns with the 25% overage for the middle schools. And I think, we said we were going to leave the money in this balance, even though Mike might not buy them. But under the circumstances, I think we should be a little more conservative and responsible with this number, put it more in line with the overage we've used historically, and grab some dollars from this line.
Do you want me to respond to that? Is that the?
I think it's just for the committee's benefit. I mean, if we're trying to trim some money, I don't know if you have on your fingertips the historical excess that we've purchased, but 25% is a lot.
It is a lot, but I mean, I think you have to also bear in mind that we're relatively new to doing the one-to-one in the middle schools, and our experience so far is that the breakage rate is far higher than it is in the high school. So particularly for the middle schools, I'd be reluctant. I mean, like I said, we can postpone buying them and hope that, the behavior of the students improves, that there's better, there's more emphasis put on it by the faculty, and the kids are better behaved with them. But right now, it's a worrying situation in terms of how many we need spare. But I'm happy to, as I said, as I proposed before, I'm happy to postpone buying some of them until it proves we need them. But
what's the historical though? Historically, we haven't bought 25% excess, and
no.
and I think it's tough because I mean we're saying, all right, we're going to cover these kids that are breaking them and not treating them well, but I have a tough time with that.
Dr. Chu?
I do just want to jump into and just say, while I appreciate Mike's concern, I want to be clear that it's not our faculty or our student behavior during the school day that's breaking all these devices. It's the fact that they're going home with them and they come into school in the morning and it's not working because something happened. It's not that, there's a bunch of Chromebook fights taking place in classrooms. But I think, Heather, I think your point, I hear what you're saying. I just know what Mike is trying to say in terms of the idea of if we reduce it from this line and then we need it, it's not necessarily available. So I don't know if there's another solution that the committee might has, like Mike's idea to not purchase them up front. I'm not sure. That would be a question kind of to Dan and Paul and Kristen about if we found ourselves in need, what would that then look like?
Yeah, I think that would be my concern, is if we find ourselves in need and we didn't have the money appropriated for it. I appreciate Mike saying that we wouldn't spend it, right, Dan? And then we could have the money come back if we didn't.
Right, it's a recurring item regardless. So whatever we don't spend in a given year just rolls into next year and reduces that request. So it's, all the money is going right towards the school computers. It's hard to get this number perfect per se, but when we move on, I'll highlight ones that we have a question on, and then we'll just keep moving forward if that's okay, just to keep the budget meeting, unless there's any other questions.
And one thing to mention, if we don't spend that money, it means it's available to us for the following year too.
Right. That's kind of what we're thinking, Mike. And that's my take on it. I agree with everybody's point, but if we're not going to spend it and then it just moves into next year, it's not as though the spend is going to be the spend as to what we need, I guess. So it's just really, are we appropriating it so that if we need it this year? I hear Heather's concern, right? If it would be one thing if we were coming in at $1.5 million and we had plenty where we're trying to look for dollars. So why don't we keep going through? We'll see where we are at the end. And then maybe this will be a bigger issue or not. So.
All right. Next up, we have the town computer renewal, and this includes some money for the police cruisers. That's correct, Mike?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to replace a couple of the cruiser. These days, the cruisers really are mobile networks. They've got all kinds of things going on in them. So yes, this will be there's a couple of the cruisers where the vehicle has now outlived the electronics that were in it originally, so we need to replace them.
Okay. And then we have the camera replacements town-wide, which is supposed to result in operational savings. The $150,000 is in net amount, and Mike is applying for a grant for the balance. Any questions? So I'll keep moving. On to public buildings with just requests. We have 20,000 for the data air unit in town hall for the vault. We did discuss possibly going to FinCom with that, but we have not made that request yet because FinCom has not met in the past month. We have the HVAC compressor at the Rogers Fire Station for $40K. And then moving down, we have the DPW cameras for the surveillance up at the garage for 110.
I had a question on that. So are they completely not usable at this point, or could we push that off for a couple more years?
The system is not completely unusable. There are some cameras that are down, and we could continue to operate the way we are for a couple more years, but it comes with a certain risk that we have areas that are not performing the way they should be surveillance wise.
So just I mean that location, right, is pretty isolated, which I assume is one of the reasons why we want to have cameras up there. But I mean, if we had cameras facing the entry point, wouldn't that give us a pretty good understanding of people who are, coming into the building area? And if there was a problem, and I'm assuming it was mostly after hours type of situations that we're looking to cover here, we would be able to capture enough information to, track down and find anybody that caused problems without having to have, fully functioning coverage up there.
To a certain extent, yes, I agree with that, Chris. But it is such a large facility that there is a lot that can happen, and there are some, it's surrounded by wooded area where if people were to get in another area, I think we could be exposed. And just from my experience with the schools, where sometimes we have to drill into certain instances that happen, if all we're seeing is the front gate and seeing what's coming and going. It really, there's a whole lot of areas up there where if we have to investigate a situation, we really want all eyes functioning up there. So.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add, we will be implementing full fleet fueling at the DPW facility on July 1st, 2024 or sooner. That's not the only reason for the cameras, but that's one of the reasons for the cameras. We will have more activity up there after hours for vehicles that are not up at DPW. And I definitely agree with Jeff's comments. We have a lot of expensive equipment up there. We do have people that could get in from areas that are not at the gate if they come by foot or bicycle or other means. So, this is quite a big facility. And I think if we're doing the camera upgrade and replacements through technology and also dovetailing it with highway garage, we can get a lot of efficiencies that way as well.
Okay.
Mike?
Yeah, I just wanted to add too that this is our first large-scale deployment of the Verkada equipment. So we were kind of going to use it as a test case for our capital item, 150,000. And perhaps in a normal situation, I wouldn't have put in for the camera upgrades yet, but we want that savings on the annual budget. So I've gone ahead and budgeted on the assumption that it's going to work out, but I really would be much happier to do one plant first and see it work out.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions out there, so we'll move on to the fire department with the service and plow truck for $100,000. Any questions here? Not seeing any. Heather?
Sorry. Can you just remind me, where does this plow?
Okay, I'm muted. That plows all the fire stations, and it also responds on calls with them during snowstorms to, if they plow up the driveway, unfortunately, to get into these houses. We've used it down on Dunstable Road, some of the small dirt roads. Getting in there is tough where we have a call in the middle of a snowstorm, so it responds with them to make access for the emergency vehicles also.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out if maybe it made sense to add fleet to highway and have them plow out the different fire stations, but I see what you're saying.
We actually took it away from them, or they asked us to take it on several years ago, when we got the first service truck. Actually, this will be the third one that we've had, because they didn't have the personnel or vehicles to do it. I don't know if that's changed or not.
Part of it is a matter of logistics as well. We could be out plowing routes. If they have an emergency call, we can't necessarily respond directly to the fire station in time to get them out the door. As Joe said, private roads as well, we don't plow those. So if they're responding to a call on a private road or a private road with a cistern that needs to be opened up, they need a first responder vehicle that can do that.
Thanks.
Good. All right, moving on to the schools, the 2 special education EV vans. Dr. Chu?
So I do think one of the things that we could look at here would be reducing this to 1 van. As we're looking at trying to look at this moving forward and how we would implement them. If we're trying to reduce numbers, this is one where I would be comfortable saying, instead of purchasing the 2, honestly, not even knowing if they're truly available yet, because that's the way that this always goes with those types of vehicles, that if we were to reduce the request to 1, that would I'm assuming, Jenny, based on the quote you saw, that would cut that number in half. Jenny might be able to, yeah. Because I just also wanted to remind everybody, the timing of this meeting is interesting, because we are waiting in just a week or 2, we'll be hearing from the MSBA as to whether or not we're going to be accepted into their potential school building project. And I'm not sure what that would do to this, or if it would have any impact at all. But those are the 2 things that are on my mind right now. So I don't know if that would be helpful in this process if we reduced our request to 1.
I think it would, Dr. Chu, if you guys are comfortable with that. I mean, that's a decent number. And again, given the uncertainty, if you're okay with it this year and maybe moving the next one to an approval for next year.
Yeah, I think we could do that.
I think that'd be great.
All right, I'm gonna create a list over here just so we can keep track of the bottom line. So if that were to, this isn't voted on yet, so I'll highlight it, but we can keep moving on, if that's okay. Heather?
Yeah, we got a question from Heather.
Sorry, I was thinking for future capital committees, it would be helpful if the schools provided the inventory of their fleet and the years and all that sort of stuff. If you sent it and I missed it, I apologize for that. But when I went back and read our minutes, the vehicles being replaced were in town only with 100,000 miles on them. And, in this day and age, that's really not too terrible. I understand that timing and ordering, it adds a significant amount of time, but especially if we're going to get on a rotating, trying to keep things current, it would just be helpful to see the whole picture.
We do have that, Heather, so we can share that. I know we have shared it with the school committee. I just don't think we shared it with capital, but we have all that information, so we could certainly provide that.
Great. John?
Dr. Chu, if we don't fund this, what happens?
Well,
in other words, we have a bank. Go ahead.
Then we wouldn't be getting one. We don't have another source identified right now to pay for it. So we just wouldn't be moving towards getting an EV van, and we would still be using our older fleet. So the idea is that these would be replacing older vehicles, which is what, or vehicles that we're trying to take off the road, which is what Heather was talking about. So we just wouldn't do that yet.
We delayed a year, John. We'd be using an older van for another year.
Yeah, is that older van, do we own that or is that leased?
All of our vans are leased. We don't own any of our vans. So that was part of the conversation that we had looked at. Jenny had done a comparison between if we were to lease an EV versus purchase the EV, and the purchasing was the better It was the better financial model. So that's why we were looking at this.
And who would be maintaining this?
That so we will be responsible to pay for all the repair and maintenance costs. We see those repair and maintenance costs has gone up significantly, and if we don't purchase the EV, we are forced to renew our current lease. The lease cost will increase $1,000 per month.
Okay. Is this a part of a plan of increasing the school ownership of the van fleet?
It's not. We're not looking at owning the entire fleet. It was just when we were looking at trying to replace a diesel engine with a EV in this scenario, it was better to purchase it. But no, we're not looking to increase so that we own our fleet. Our fleet is leased currently.
Okay, thank you.
Heather, do you want to go?
Yeah, so can you just, what did you just say about $1,000 a month? Is that per vehicle?
Yes, that's per vehicle because all those 3 wheelchair vans, they already expired and the lease term already expired either on 2017 or 2018. Due to the COVID disruption, we were not able to renew those leases. Now, the merchant fleet, the vendor actually is forcing us to renew those leases because they already expired about 7 or 8 years ago.
It's an additional $1,000 a month we'd be paying for the van that we're leasing, as opposed to we're not replacing
An additional or total?
Additional.
So what is the total monthly lease for one van?
So the total monthly lease will be $1,862 per vehicle.
Is there some kind of analysis? Because I mean, if I look at that, you know, $1,800 times 12 months, 21,000. That's like 5 years of what this new vehicle. I mean, I don't know how long the EVs last, but do you see where I'm getting with the math? If you have 21,000 for a monthly expense, that gets you almost 6 years of a vehicle. Are we going to keep it more than 6 years? I mean, we're trying to replace vehicles that are 6 years old right now.
So yeah, go ahead, Jenny. I was going to say Jenny had done all of that cost analysis when we were looking at it. That's what we were looking at but she can break that down again for you. Go ahead, Jenny.
Right. We do have a cost analysis for the purchasing and the leasing, and we can send it to Capital Committee for review. So we can tell how much we can save. If we purchase the vehicle, we can save about $30,000 for each vehicle. That's why we have this proposal to purchase the EV, because that's a huge saving for the town.
Yeah, we talked about this when we went through it, Heather. If you can send it again, Jenny, that would be helpful. I don't want to get caught up. We need to get through this list, but
Sure.
if you could send it out again, that would be great. I would appreciate that.
Okay.
All right, Dan, let's keep moving.
All right, moving on to DPW. Just brief overview. We asked Steve and his team to kind of go through and prioritize the 17 projects that were here through the general fund. So Steve, if there are any changes or recommendations that you want to touch on to start off, that'd be great.
So as Dan said, the DPW team met. We looked at each one of the individual requests we have. We tried to rank these according to basically beginning with existing equipment needs and our current backlog and equipment, our critical systems, and then with a focus on trying to gain efficiencies through some vehicle upgrades and replacement or equipment replacement as well. Then we kind of focused on planning and design for the future, whether that be looking at existing infrastructure or a design for new infrastructure or safety improvements. And we kind of followed that with any projects that would add new infrastructure to the town with some legacy maintenance costs. and finally kind of balance that all with our current workload and what we're able to accomplish. So based on that, those are the rankings that you have before you. You'll notice that, you know, at least on the front end, it's pretty heavy in terms of vehicle replacement, especially on the fleet side. You know, we're hoping through the replacement of these vehicles, we're going to gain some efficiencies. Obviously fuel efficiencies, but operational efficiencies as well, in terms of snow and ice, you know, through things like ground speed controllers, that'll help us to reduce salt consumption, you know, maybe spread routes out and things like that. So, that was kind of our thinking and what we've come up with. We do see a few opportunities here, maybe to, you know, shift some of these expenses to other means. One of those being the townwide sidewalk assessment. As you see, we had a quote for $184,500. And reviewing that proposal, you know, really, I think our focus needs to be on tasks 1 and 2, creating an inventory assessment and a conditional assessment of those sidewalks so that we can develop a prioritized plan for you know, repairing some of those sidewalks, as well as some of the town's long-term goals like sidewalk snow removal. You know, there is an opportunity to fund that through Chapter 90. So if we would reduce that scope, I think we would recommend doing that as well. The zero-turn mower as well. I think we have an opportunity to fund that out of the field maintenance revolving fund, if there isn't capital funding available for that. Yeah, it looks like Chris has some questions.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, barely. Yes.
Okay, there we go.
So the question that I have is related to the project for Hartford Road. And what I see when I look down at the capital funded via other means section of this document, there's still a line item for the design and construction of Hartford Road betterments. It was my understanding that that was off the table. Is that changed?
The Hartford Road betterment was for a water betterment, but yes, it's off the table at this point. We're not moving forward with that project.
Okay. The reason why I asked is, you know, why spend money on the Hartford Road speed study if perhaps we were going to bundle sidewalks or something as a combination project of doing water main improvements or something on Hartford Road. So thank you for that clarity. I will say that I appreciate, you know, engineering and DPW's efforts to prioritize a very, very long list with a lot of different competing needs. And I agree with a lot of what you guys have put out here. One area, Steve, that I think you're well aware that I've had trouble supporting, and I believe the Pedestrian Safety Committee would have similar concerns, is the townwide sidewalk assessment funding. I love the idea of reducing the scope. I like the idea of potentially funding it with Chapter 90. If we had excess Chapter 90 funds, I would think that the Pedestrian Safety Committee, and again, we haven't had this discussion with the committee, but they would probably want to see those funds being diverted to, say, the construction of phase 2 of Plain Road versus doing the sidewalk assessment. All right, we definitely recognize that, you know, the need that we want to understand the conditions and the state of our existing infrastructure for sidewalks and how we're going to bring those, you know, up to better standards. But on balance, when we analyze that need versus the need for just having sidewalks in the first place, historically, it's been, let's just get sidewalks in the first place out, and we'll, you know, try to deal with some of our existing sidewalk infrastructure as we can. And I think that there is some very evident areas of existing sidewalk infrastructure that we can start to tackle and address without having to do an assessment to, you know, look at what we have townwide. So it would be my opinion that this is definitely an area that we should not fund this year. And if we do have additional Chapter 90 funds, we should use those to do some of these other pedestrian safety related projects.
Anybody else on that? John?
Yes, if I were going to use that, the funds, I'd look at some of the roads that we're not repairing. There's some roads that are pretty close to reaching the list. And I would like to balance that sidewalk need with the road needs before I would transfer it to the sidewalks.
All right. Any other comments on sidewalk assessment?
Just the only thing I would say to that, Dan, is with the pavement management plan that we've put in place for the last couple of years, our road surface rating has actually increased and we've reduced our backlog with the current investment that we're making. You know, our sidewalk infrastructure around town, you know, these older sidewalks are crumbling and, you know, we're just deferring those costs for the future. I think we have opportunities to, you know, to use some of the mitigation agreement to help address that. We're only spending about $10,000 a year out of our current highway budget on sidewalk maintenance. That's likely going to be reduced in the current budget scenario. So, you know, we really would prefer the sidewalk assessment so we can really prioritize where we spend those funds and try to get the best bang for our dollar. But I understand Chris's point that, you know, we have public safety needs as well that that may outweigh that. So, you know, we look to the committee, obviously, to make those recommendations.
Valerie?
Steve, thank you. I really appreciate the explanation of how you guys went through and prioritized and all the different factors you thoughtfully considered. Could you just speak one more time a little bit about the assessment with the concerns Chris raised? I just want to make sure I'm really understanding. You said that it does an inventory of all the sidewalks in town, and then what other value are you looking for?
Yep, so it gives an inventory of sidewalks. It looks at basically construction materials, existing width, ADA compliance, you know, replacement costs, those types of things. You know, one of the things we've talked about here around town is, you know, long term, we'd like to be able to plow more sidewalks, and we don't have a great understanding of, you know, what equipment we can use on what sidewalks, because we don't have that inventory in place right now.
So to make it super low level, I guess, for me, this sounds a little bit like kind of what, like a strategic plan, right? Like you're looking to would you take that information then and sort of look out a couple years, almost like your pavement management
Exactly,
system?
yeah. So it would dovetail with the pavement management program. So right now, you know, we don't replace or upgrade any of our sidewalks as we're doing pavement management upgrades. You know, you'll see there are some neighborhoods that we've done recently where we've just overlaid the road. The existing sidewalks are bituminous concrete and they're crumbling. So, you know, we'd like to bring this in and take a more holistic approach to investing in our roads.
Thank you for that. It's very helpful.
Chris?
Yeah, sorry, just as a follow-up, I mean, again, my point has always been, you know, the pedestrian safety committee and the bright minds in engineering DPW could get together and, you know, figure out what, you know, are our next top 10 existing sidewalks that we need to rehabilitate. And, you know, the time that it's going to take and the cost it's going to take to work through those projects is considerable. So what I'm really worried about here is we spend the money on a project like this and it sits there and we don't do anything with it because, you know, we really, in my opinion, know the answers already to get us started. And by the time the data that this, you know, assessment would provide, which is sort of the second, third, fourth tier sidewalks that we need to rehabilitate, by the time we get around to that, the material, the data is going to be dated. Our financial picture is going to be different. I just don't see any value whatsoever in this that we ourselves internally in Westford can you know, put together. So that's why I've always had a real difficult time with this particular ask, and it's been on the books for several years at this point. So just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Okay. All right, for the sake of moving on, I guess we'll just go through the list quickly. or as long as it takes. Hartford Road traffic calming, we had ranked at number 11. And then we had the West Street and North Main Street pedestrian safety improvements for 30,000, ranked at 9. And then the Groton Road pedestrian safety improvements ranked at number 12 for 25,000. Any comments on those projects, Christina?
Yeah, just a question. Specifically the, like the Hartford Road and the other two pedestrian safety. Can any of that be done in-house, or would we be looking to outsource this?
We would be outsourcing those. You're looking at a traffic engineer that would be taking traffic counts, looking at pedestrian conflicts, those types of things. So it's beyond, just a simple civil engineer. Specialized approach.
Okay.
All right, moving down the list, we have the Stony Brook Middle School wastewater treatment plant for 700,000. This is the last of the plants to get done. Then we get into some vehicles here. We have the 3/4 ton 4x4 front end loader, ranked number 15, and the portable changeable message sign, ranked number 16. Steve, was there a possibility of delaying those to a future meeting if need be?
Yes, absolutely.
Heather?
I was just gonna say the same thing. Those are ranked so low. And I know there's another or two front end loaders that are used at the highway garage. My preference would be to push them off. But I also wanted to ask, how many vehicles do you have in the fleet that go out on the road in a storm? Just out of curiosity.
Kyle, do you have that number offhand?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now, Steve.
It's the majority of the fleet that goes out. There's only very few vehicles that we have that don't have plows on them.
We have about 25 vehicles that go out in each storm.
So I was looking up, and I'm just going to put in this little plug at our numbers of employees and students for the schools. And I happened to come across the highway department. And it looks like there's only 15, at least in this annual report from 2022, heavy equipment operators that I would assume could drive these kind of things. So I just want to make sure that we're not making inventory higher than we can even utilize.
So that 15 may include highway, but it doesn't include parks. It doesn't include water that uses those vehicles as well. We have contract drivers that we hire that operate town equipment. We utilize contractors as well that have their own equipment that they drive. So, all these vehicles are being operated either by contract drivers for the town or town staff. So, and we have our crew leaders in addition to our heavy equipment operators, our mechanics, our cemetery laborers, they're in vehicles as well.
Okay, yeah, I just think we need to make sure in future years we watch it. I mean, this is 10 heavy equipment operators, 4 from Parks and Rec, and 1 from cemetery. So I think just for future years, we just need to make sure we're not oversupplying our inventory.
So Steve, on these ones, you'd be okay with the front end loader and the sign coming off for next year's?
Yeah, those two particular pieces of equipment, yes. We are, as we mentioned, looking into grant opportunities for the sign that do turn up periodically. The front end loader isn't a primary piece of equipment that's on the road. It's, we're using that in specialized situations. So, we may have to shift some things around, but we think we can delay that a year.
Okay. I think just given where we're at, Dan, that would be helpful. You want to put those in at 0 for now, so update the total.
Yeah, we're getting close. So the SUV midsize replacement, ranked number 6. John?
Steve, how do you plan to use this? How do you use this SUV? Could a hybrid do as well as an EV? Are you determined to make this an electrical vehicle? And is this thing stored outside, or because these batteries kind of operate less efficiency if they're out in the cold?
No, this would be stored inside. We do have the charging infrastructure if we opt to go with an electrical vehicle. We put in both options just to show the cost difference between a hybrid versus electric. It doesn't really make a difference to us which one is approved, but we wanted to let the committee at least make them aware of the cost difference between the two.
So what is the difference?
So John, I can jump in here. So the EV is the price you see in this table, which is 65,000. Going with the hybrid or regular gas powered would be about 50,000. So $15,000 difference.
Okay. Thank you.
And Christina?
Yeah, Kyle, that 65,000, does that include any sort of rebate?
It
Oh,
did,
maybe.
about a $3,000 rebate. I talked to Sue Thomas about that, and she filled me in on what opportunities might be available.
So I'm sorry, I missed it. So does that include rebates or not?
It does. Yes, it does.
And Christine?
I'm just curious about the cost of this pickup truck versus the $100,000 truck that the fire department wants to use for plowing. Is it a different vehicle altogether? Just don't understand the cost difference, that's all.
This one would not be a plow vehicle. That's the primary difference.
Yeah, mid-size, you're not gonna put a plow on this one, Christine. It's too small.
Okay. And,
Is the $140,000 is also 2 trucks though, right?
yes.
Is that Christine, does that answer your question?
She was talking about the fire department
Oh,
truck.
sorry.
Okay, that's
Oh,
it.
That's
okay.
right too. Valerie's right. That's a
Sorry.
3/4 ton pickup.
It's too many trucks.
Mid-size can't do it. No, you're right.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, moving down to cemetery, they have the 1-ton dump truck with plow for 80,000, ranked number 4 on our list. Any questions on that?
Sorry, I don't have a question on that specific one, but just going back to the fire department one versus the 3/4 ton. So what is the size of the fire department pickup? Is it larger than 3/4 or is it a 1-ton?
So I believe that the highway department request would be a 1/2 ton. The fire department request, Joe, you can confirm that, but I believe that's a 3/4 ton with a plow as well as auxiliary fuel tank.
Correct. It's actually a 1-ton with the fuel tank, and it's set for towing the foam trailer and the boats.
So we have a 1-ton with a plow for 80,000 for the DPW cemetery. So the extra 20,000 for your truck is because of that specialized hookup?
Well, it's for that. It's for the lights, the upfitting of all the lights, because it does have emergency lights responding calls
okay.
and the radios. So that's where that comes in.
Thank you.
Yep.
Christina?
Yeah, the line 42, the 3/4 ton, what is that, gas or diesel?
I believe we spec those as gas, Kyle.
I believe so, yeah.
Couple of reasons is, one of them being availability.
Okay, so I recall that the fire truck was diesel, and that was another upcharge. Can we look at that again? Because if the highway department can get a plow truck with gas and feel comfortable with it, then I'd sort of like to revisit the fire truck.
Yeah, so one of the things to note on the fire truck is that they receive their fuel on site at the station and fill their vehicles up there as well. And I believe it's diesel, Joe, is that correct?
It is diesel, and the other problem is for the towing. I mean, we probably could get away with the gas for the towing, but the foam trailer is 500 gallons that we tow. It's a double
Okay.
axle trailer.
I forgot about the towing. All right.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, we just mentioned the cemetery 1-ton dump truck. I didn't see any questions on that. And then we had the 2 other requests for the cemetery, the gazebo and the tomb repairs, which I believe, Steve, you're having difficulty getting quotes for. So are these a push for now?
Yeah, these are a push for now. Again, you know, we are concerned about the ability to salvage the gazebo. We've had a hard time getting an architect to look at it just because it's such a small project. The tomb repairs, I think, you know, worst case is we could try to make some short-term temporary repairs to try to get us through another year here.
And Chris?
Yeah, two questions. So the comments on the 1-ton dump truck, conceptual estimate provided 100,000 K stormwater. So are we saying that we can pay for this truck out of stormwater?
Chris, that's my fault. I left that comment in there from a
Oh.
previous year. Good catch. Thank you.
Okay, but so my second question is, so do we treat the funds that we get from, you know, this plot of the cemetery sales as that an enterprise fund? And do we use that money to pay for repairs like this to cemetery related infrastructure?
So those are an eligible usage for cemetery improvements. It just has to go to town meeting for, it's not an enterprise, it has its own specific rules and whatnot, but for all intents and purposes, it is there for cemetery repairs.
Okay, thank you.
And Heather?
I was curious if the historical commission was contacted with the gazebo. I can see what it would be difficult to get someone in there for that such small project, but there's some folks that are really into historical preservation and they might have connections with professionals who would also be very interested in historical preservation. It just seems
I believe that came up during the last capital meeting. We haven't done that yet, but we do plan to do that. And we know that we had planned on waiting on this project based on you know, the delays we were having. So we will loop them in on the conversation. We do have a cemetery commission member who's also a member of the Westford Museum as well that's been involved in this project.
Would it be eligible for CPA then?
I think it would be. Dan may be able to give more clarification on that. I think there's a few options we may have.
I mean, we've had similar projects like the Forge Footworkers Path or whatever it was. So like smaller projects like this for historical purposes have been approved in the past. So it's something we could definitely check out as an alternative funding source in the future. I think the biggest issue is just getting a quote at this point. All right, then lastly, we have the zero-turn mower, which we could pay for using field maintenance funds. We do have 124,000 in that revolving fund right now, which is a pretty healthy balance. So, my opinion, I do think we could pay the 20,000 out of it and still be in good shape for the year. Any other questions on these? True up the total here. So decision on the sidewalk assessment. Do we either not fund it out of this or through Chapter 90? What are people's thoughts here? Heather?
I agree with Chris Barrett. I think there's not, I would echo his thoughts and support what he said.
And John? If you're on mute, John.
John, you're on mute.
Yeah, I agree with Chris. I think we could delay this. I think Chris and the sidewalk committee have a pretty good handle on what they need right now.
All right. Any other comments or? So we'll put this down as not in there for now. So we're down to 2,082,000, which is under that $2.2 million target, which is great. I think that gives us some maneuverability and flexibility come up to town meeting to address other concerns that may come up. Any other questions on the items coming from free cash?
Dan, I want to bring up the town hall compressor again and get Jeff's opinion on the life of that and if we should be doing that through a reserve fund or if we should be waiting to town meeting. If Jeff's still on.
Hi. Yeah, I think we certainly could wait till town meeting at this point, where we're now in the winter season. That unit really provides the bulk of its service during the summer months when it's very humid out. So I think that we can safely wait until town meeting to vote on that.
Dan, I also want to go back up to the school computers if we're gonna address,
Yeah.
because I think that's one of the only ones sitting out there. I get everybody's concern, but I'd rather just leave it as it is with the contingency. I think the fact that it will roll over to next year if they don't spend it makes it smart. And for the small dollars, especially where we're given, it's too much of a risk to start playing around with it, in my opinion. I understand other people's thoughts on it, but unless the majority don't feel, and I'll go with the majority if they don't feel, but I'd rather just leave that as is personally. Mike, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I did the arithmetic. If we have 90 spare Chromebooks for the middle schools in the original draft. If we were to cut that to 50, that is to say save 40 of them, that would be a saving of 10,880.
That's not a big enough number in my mind to mess with the plan. And again, they're not going to spend it. If he doesn't need it, if Mike doesn't need it, he's not going to spend it. It will roll into next year. I think it's smart just to leave it with his plan. Mike's done a really good job with these as the years go. So, Heather, go ahead.
It's just commenting on when Mike just said there was 45 extra for the middle schools. That's just for the one grade, right?
So there were a total of 90 spare machines, 45 in each location.
Right,
And
but that's only for grade 5. We're only buying.
Correct. We're only buying for one. So we only buy Chromebooks for the incoming grade 6. And there were four, I think we have 360 students total estimated, 180 in each middle school. So
But you have extras from the prior years is my point. This is only 45 extra for just the one grade of students. So you would have had 45 plus last year's plus the year before's.
Correct. Yeah.
So that would be upwards of probably 100 or more extra devices.
Well, except that the majority of those extras have probably already been deployed.
Yeah, I think they roll every year, Heather, right? That's kind of what Mike's saying is what he needs and what he doesn't is rolling every year into the next request. So Mike, just to put it down, if we reduced it, it's a $10,000 savings on this 397. It's not a 50,000 by pulling anything else.
Correct. So the plan as it's shown has an excess of 90 machines more than we expect students. And if we reduce that to 50 more, which is more in line with historically what we've done for the high school, then that would save us 10,000.
So it's a $10,000 difference. Okay.
But as I said, we are seeing a high rate of attrition on those machines in the middle schools, and we've struggled this year to keep those machines going.
Again, I agree with it. I think it makes sense. John, did you have a question?
No, I just agree with you, Paul. Thanks.
Okay. Appreciate it. Anybody else? And Heather, I'm not discounting your concern at all. I totally get it. I just disagree. But does anybody else on the committee feel differently than John and I have commented? Because if so, we should.
Can I just make one more comment? I'm fine with it, whatever. But I do think there should be some kind of figuring into this budget to use either. I know you said the insurance was outsourced, but we went years ago from no students having their own Chromebooks to them all having their own Chromebooks paid for by international students to now paid for and in excess by the taxpayer. So I think there needs to be some kind of incentive or maybe a deposit or some kind of program to kind of get these machines. I mean, maybe we dock them at school, they don't bring them home. I don't know, but it just seems a little bit crazy. And if we're going to follow our capital rules that, things need to exist more than 5 years, then, this could potentially become an operating expense, right?
The machines we do use them for more than 5 years. I mean, because what happens with these machines for the 6th graders, they'll use them for 3 years in the middle school, and then they'll go down to the elementary schools. And we usually get at least 3 more years out of them before and usually the machines become unusable, assuming they don't get broken, when we can't use them for MCAS testing anymore. And then really it's hard to find a place to put them after that because MCAS is so widespread.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess unless there's any other issues on that, we're in agreement to leave it. I think is that all we have questions on that one, Dan? I just we can put that to rest then.
Like it, yeah.
Okay, good.
All right.
Yep.
Sure. So that's capital funded via other means. Steve, you had an update on Jack Walsh courts.
Yes, thank you, Dan. So we have a $400,000 appropriation for community preservation for the replacement of the Jack Walsh athletic courts. We bid that project out in October and opened bids on October 25th. We received 6 bids. Unfortunately, our low bid was for $425,000, which was above our appropriation. The bids range from $425,000 to $727,000. So we are going to need a supplement. We have looked at at opportunities to rebid this project, but at this point, with price escalation and people already having a look behind the curtain, we feel that we probably aren't going to reduce that any further. So we are going to need a supplemental appropriation in order to award a contract. We have been in touch with the contractor, and we're trying to secure a letter from them to hold their bid price of $425,000 until we can come up with a supplemental appropriation. But we are recommending that we secure the additional funding as well as some contingency on that project in the event we find some things that we hadn't planned for. So that being said, we would need an additional 25 for the contract, and then we're recommending 42,500 in contingency. So an additional 67,500. We're aware that community preservation meets December 5th. And would like some guidance from capital on whether we should pursue that as an avenue for the additional funding.
Any comments on that, Chris?
It's Chris to comment, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. My feeling is if we could fund this alternatively out of not out of CPA, as you can see, we have a lot of asks going to CPA this year. And I think it would go a long way if we could find alternative funding, even if it comes from free cash, to get us over the hump on this project. This has been and one of these projects has been going on for a long time. I think we've had the courts offline for over 5 years, 6 years. Really want to see this one get done and make this recreation resource whole again. And it's unfortunate that we keep seeing price increases like we're seeing, and I think that lends some urgency to trying to get this solved sooner rather than later. So my recommendation is we try to fund this out without going to CPA.
Heather?
I actually prefer all these projects to go through CPA because we pay into it and et cetera. But I am wondering about the timing, and if you're trying to get them to hold their bid price, if it would be reasonable to use whatever that capital fund is that allows for spend when something comes up and it's kind of urgent. I forget what the account is. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it related to the Main Street building too, something that we would use without having to wait for town meeting.
I think the only options we have for mid-year transfers would be the FinCom reserve or ARPA funding.
Isn't there an emergency capital fund?
The stabilization fund?
I don't know, maybe.
That requires a 2/3 vote at town meeting to appropriate from, so that would have to wait regardless.
Okay, for some reason I thought there was some fund we paid into that, but I might be confusing my funds.
There's a lot of funds, it happens.
Is it the one-time sale of land fund that we used from 63 Main that you're thinking about? For capital?
It might be. I just, in the 9 years I've done this, I felt like there was some bucket for emergency use for capital purchases.
I mean, we have insurance recovery, but that's limited. I don't think we have enough in there to actually cover it. So, yeah, I'm not aware of any. Chris?
Yeah, so Steve, you said 25 to cover the difference from the current appropriation to the new bid price, but then you said 42,000 additional. I mean, that existing bid has a fairly large contingency already built in. So how did you come up with the 42,000 additional contingency number?
Well, it's additional 10% contingency on top of the actual bid price that we received. So when we had our initial estimate of 400, that included 10% contingency, but the actual bid prices we received were significantly higher than that. So we've lost all contingency at this point. Basically, through the contract, we'd be obligated to pay that 425. So in the event we saw anything outside of what was in the original bid, we would need money to overcome that.
So they start to work and run into some problem that they didn't anticipate. We have to cover the difference to.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, we can't hear you for some
Tom, you're
reason.
on mute.
Nothing.
Use sign language.
You want to type it? In the chat.
Smoke signals. So any other thoughts from the committee on this one? I think where we're sitting right now is, and I hear Chris Barrett's point. I think it's fair. Look, we've got a lot coming down here. We're asking them for. So I guess thoughts would be to not have it in there, which given our approvals and previously and the other money going into it, I think would be disappointing to ask for it to go to CPC or to move it up into the free cash. So any thoughts from, I'm open to what the committee's thinking. Chris, go ahead before.
Yeah, just one quick thought. Could we do the 25 out of the FinCom reserve and then get the contingency from free cash or from maybe CPA if we had to? Would that allow us
Put it
to
up that way?
Yeah.
Dan, can we do that?
We require a finance committee vote to appropriate the 25K. But then, construction is not going to take place until spring regardless. So if they do hold the bid, I feel like it's better to get the entire funding in place before we go ahead and sign off, because odds are something will come up that we may require some contingency. Steve, if you disagree with me, let me know. But
no, I agree with Dan's sentiment.
So Steve, you feel that this vendor is going to honor their price? You have that in writing?
We don't have that in writing yet. Our designers have reached out to them and we're trying to get that in writing. We have up to, with mutually agreed upon up to 6 months to award a contract, but my feeling is that they will likely honor that bid price.
Okay.
Val?
Could you speak to at the start of the meeting you alluded to or Paul alluded to sort of a goal for what the free cash number was trying to get down to? I'm just trying to figure out.
We have, it's 2.2. We're trying to get it under 2.2. So we're at 208 now.
And so adding the 67
Wouldn't necessarily drive us over it.
Right. Unless I'm missing something. Just seems like we could just add it to above.
Yep, agree.
I think that's a reasonable ask given everything else we're pushing out to CPC. I would be okay with that if the majority of the committee is fine with that move. I think it's fair.
Any objections?
No.
Tom, you objecting, or can you speak now?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's much better.
See, this is what happens when IT messes around with my computer.
We'll get you a new Chromebook.
Yeah, thank you. So you answered my previous question that I was going to ask about the timing of when the funds would be available. But I guess, Steve, I mean, the work wouldn't be scheduled to be started anytime. Wasn't planning to be starting this winter anyway, right?
So our plan was to try to start demolition this winter, and then get into all subsurface construction in the spring. So we're going to be probably delayed a couple of weeks, but our ultimate goal was to have these ready by the summer of this year. So I think we'll still be able to meet that goal if we can award a contract and begin heavy construction early spring.
Yeah, okay. That was what I was curious about. How much is this gonna, I mean, how much is this going to impact the use of this next summer? But all right, thank you.
I mean, depending, if weather had cooperated all winter long, we would have progressed as much as possible. But again, this type of project would have been dependent on that.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Steve. So how would this put us back only a few weeks if we have to wait for town meeting to approve this? So now we're, March, hopefully.
Mhm.
And then you said you were going to do some work over the winter. Well, now we're into the spring.
Right. So as I said, originally we were looking at a couple of weeks of demolition to remove the existing that was out there. And then at that point, construction would have paused the remainder of the winter and then would have picked back up in the spring. So
I get
essentially
it.
it pushes the start time back a few weeks. If we can get the money by town meeting in April, we can award a contract, immediately thereafter and be ready to hit the ground April 15th during construction season.
Right. The couple of weeks you're referring to are the couple of weeks of demo that we would have done.
Correct. Yes.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Paul, I just had one other quick
Go ahead,
question. So Dan, so we did do I remember we did, I think it was on the communications tower combined dispatch where we did like a emergency or reserve fund transfer, because we were short on funds for that project, but that has to then be returned, right, at town meeting if you do a transfer.
No, what we've done in the past is once the FinCom appropriates those funds, that's it. They're out of the FinCom reserve. So they do have 125,000 sitting there. But what we've done in the past is we've supplemented the FinCom reserve at town meeting. So they're whole going into the end of the year. So we have that flexibility. If we don't use it, just closing out the free cash for the following year.
All right, I got you. Thank you.
John?
John, you're on mute.
I like the idea of moving it up to free cash. I think we need to award it, because if we waited till spring to award the contract, I think it could possibly go up without some kind of a commitment from the contractor.
So Steve works on that commitment. Hopefully we can get that in writing too. Okay. All right, so it's moved up above. All right, I know Paul has a hard stop at 10, so if we can try to go through the rest of the requests here. For CPA, we have, actually for the Chapter 90, we have the 1.2 million earmark for the roads. For CPA, we have 2.4 million for the Stony Brook track and courts, and 6 million for the American Legion fields, and 510,000 for the tennis courts. So those are the heavy requests that are going into CPA this year. Just going to keep going down the list, if that's right, for sake of time here. For Stormwater Enterprise, we have the pole camera for 20,000, the new ambulance and power cot, and the radios for a total of 554, which we do have to bond this because we don't have enough retained earnings. However, at a future meeting, what we can do is appropriate those retained earnings and rescind the bond, so we don't have to borrow for the ambulance. And then finally, we have the water request for the treatment plants for PFAS at 24.5. John?
Yes. Dan, could you, we keep putting, doing the bonding with CPA funds and putting a lot on the CPA account. And they're getting about, what, $3 million a year from the budget. How much do they have committed year? How much wiggle room do they have between what they have committed with the bonding and how much do they have discretion over each year now that we keep adding bonding to their account?
Sure. So the process is we only bond what we bring in locally through the surcharge. We don't depend on the state aid assessment. So the state aid, what we're getting locally is about 2.4, 2.5 million a year now. So that's a whole lot of bonding capacity. Where we paid off East Boston camps, we have issued some other bonds in the past, for like Rodenbush and the Adams property and a couple other things, but there's still lots of bonding capacity there that they can fit the 6 million in, and depending on how we want to handle the 2.4 million from the courts, it's possible. We do have some authorizations for 35 Town Farm Road as well. But we do have an analysis that kind of shows, you know, how much to bring in locally, the 10% trade-offs that we have to allocate towards historical affordable housing and open space, and then the remaining available for bonding. So I can send it out to the committee if they'd like to see that.
Yeah, I'd like to see that because we keep adding on to the CPA, and I just wonder when we're going to run out of runway.
Sure, I'll put some estimates in for these projects as well.
Thank you.
See what they would cost.
Good point.
Any other questions on these? Chris?
Yeah, so sorry, so your intent would be if all these were brought to CPA, that you would bond the Stony Brook, bond the American Legion Fields, and then the other projects, the court replacement and the playground, would just come out of where? Would we bond those two, or since they're over 500,000?
No, those we have about 3.5 million in undesignated funds for CPA, so we try to utilize those first.
Yep.
And then if we can't fit a project in, and we can do a combination too, like we want to issue a $1 million bond for the Stony Brook track, and then 1.4 from undesignated. That's another option. So I know Jesse works closely with you when you're going through the projects in a different funding scenario. So we'll be sure to be on top of that this year, and we can make some recommendations if that helps.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Great. All right, any other questions on any of these projects? We just have the other ones designated for bonding. See a lot of repetitive numbers down here, 600,000. So basically the phase 2 Plain Road sidewalk is down here for 600,000. Phase 1 is already appropriated or authorized, I should say, at 600,000. And then we have the DPW's 2 highest priorities is getting those 6-wheel dump trucks in here, the 4 of them, the 2 of them being the swap loaders. So those are in here to be borrowed over 10 years. I will say we just had some equipment paid off from the fire department and DPW that we did 10 years ago. So, you know, we have done this before with some of the equipment. Any questions on those? Not seeing any. Do we want to kind of go through and see if anybody has any strong feelings about any of the projects in particular and not moving forward?
Well, so Dan, at this point, I mean, we met the free cash number with the committee's changes that we've already talked about. Is there any other concerns about what we've got going on here from a funding perspective, bonding capacity perspective?
For bond capacity, I think we may want to revisit the trucks just if an override does not pass, just to make sure we can afford the debt payment in the future, just before we actually purchase those. I think we have to look at that. But overall, like all the enterprise does fit within. We do have a plan, or we can create a plan that CPA can fund the projects here. And you know, that number being under 2.2 makes me feel a lot better, so we can address other needs. So overall, I do like this plan. I'm comfortable with it for now. If anything changes, of course, we could come back and let you know. But for now, I think this is good.
And does this plan work without an override? This is just with a non-override scenario, correct?
So with the override scenario, the bonding, like they'd have to move forward anyways, because we only have the one town meeting. So that authorization would be out there to borrow the trucks. If we need time, we can always borrow short term. There's a couple things we can do with some of these borrowed projects to free up some time and secure funding too. So I'm not overly worried about bonding for the trucks, purchasing those. Heather? I think you're on mute.
You just said you weren't worried about bonding those trucks, but that's 4 trucks for 1.2 million, and interest rates are so high that, you know, I know I guess how long would that borrowing be? And I know that this isn't the forum to discuss funding, but and what's the rate? And if I feel like we've done bonding in trucks before, and it just never looks that great.
The rate's still about 4.25, under 4 actually, Christine. We get monthly or bi-weekly, I think, rates on different bonds that have been issued in other municipalities, and the rates are still very favorable despite higher interest rates elsewhere. So bonding has not kept up with the even mortgage rates. So municipal bonds are very safe. So we've, in all of our assumptions, we have 4.25, and those are still holding true. Yeah, it'd be probably a 10-year bond for equipment. So 1.2 million is probably about 144,000, I'd say, per year.
Yeah, I mean, this is my last hurrah here on capital, and I just, I prefer that we try to use free cash for vehicles. I think I've only seen a couple bonded over my time doing this, but if it's at all possible, I would rather see those paid for.
Christina?
Yeah, Dan, these 3 items for bonding, is this excluded or non-excluded?
Not excluded.
Okay.
So within the levy.
All right, not seeing any other questions. Dan, do we want to move to the vote on the initial recommendations for Kristen for the budget purposes? Again, I
Sure,
think we'd
okay.
ask if anybody has any individual ones that either like to abstain from or vote no, but they feel good with the rest of the list. I don't want to make this where everybody's picking and choosing onesies, twosies, and ins and outs, but if anybody has a real strong feeling, again, if you need to abstain from any, or if there's 1 or 2 or whatever, as opposed to just staying out, can you let us know right now? And then we'll note those individually, and then ideally move to a vote for the initial recommendation. Tom, go ahead.
Thank you, Paul. So along that line, I should abstain from the vote of the construction of the PFAS water treatment plants.
Noted. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Anybody else on anything on this list that they'd like to abstain or vote no, but vote for yes for the rest of the list? I'm not seeing any hands right now, but. Okay. In that case, Tom, go ahead.
Actually, sorry. You should add also, I have to abstain from Stony Brook wastewater treatment plant too.
Okay, so PFAS and Stony Brook wastewater.
Yeah, thank you.
Those 2 for Tom, we'll note in the minutes, just a note for Pam. All right. Another Tom? Okay. All right, with that, Dan, I guess we'll move. Can we get a motion to approve the straw person plan as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Chris. Any seconds?
Second,
John, was that you I heard for a second?
yes.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna actually do a full roll call, not show of hands on this one. So I am a yes. Dan?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Dr. Chu?
Yes.
You, Valerie?
Yes.
Chris Barrett?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes, with the 2 abstentions.
Thank you. And John?
Yes.
All right, that's all in favor. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody's help too. Everybody joining. This was a big one to get through. There's a lot of kind of ad hoc requests. So Chief, Steve, Kyle, everybody that joined, Jeff, Mark, Mike, appreciate it all. So thank you guys for joining us for this. Incredibly helpful. All right, I think we're good there. We will we'll continue on with next step, Dan, just approval of the minutes from November 2nd, unless you have any other old business you want to go through first. Let's do the approval and then we can move on. I got 10 left, so we can try to wrap it up. If not, I'll hand it over to you, Dan. But so we have the meeting minutes from the only major one I have on this one, Pam, just for your notes, is John was here. He's not located in the presence, but I appreciated his presence. So John, I wanted you to know that I noted that you were here.
That was my only comment.
I like it. Anybody else have any significant changes? Again, we could just, if you have any nits or edits or something like that, you can always send it to Pam offline. But anything major anybody would like to know?
Motion to approve.
Thanks, Dan.
Second.
I can see a show of hands, all in favor.
Thank you, Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
Spam.
All right, we're good on the minutes. All right, Dan, we have old business next, but is there anything with going just through the list? Is there anything you want to bring up?
I think I'm pretty good at this point. I think we talked about everything, so.
All right, so next steps, next meeting. John, you still have your hand raised on the minute. You have a question or just hang over? That's all right. All good. So Dan, we want to talk through next steps. So this again, maybe just walk everybody through with this initial recommendation, how that goes. And then when we'll need to go get together again.
Sure. So we're going to build these recommendations into the model with Kristen's recommendation. And then she is presenting the budget to the select board finance committee on and school committee, I think is invited on December 12th at the select board meeting. And then we're going to move forward into January where the budget hearings are, which doesn't necessarily apply to capital, but I will give a capital presentation at the last one in February. And then we're off to town meeting recommendations for the select board and finance committee probably in February and early March. So if need be, if we need to call another meeting in January at some time because something changes, we can do that. But at this point, I don't think we need to schedule a meeting just for the sake of it. But if we have changes, I think we can reconvene.
Sounds good. I think we've had a January meeting every year in the past, if I recall. I don't recall a year not having it, but we don't need it.
Normally, right. If anything comes up and there are changes, we'll definitely come back for a new recommendation.
It'll be January. So just for everybody's edification, if it happens, it'll be January before we need to meet again. So we're done with each other for the holidays. I'm gonna miss you, Dan. I might just call you instead just to talk.
That's fine. I'm around.
All right. Anybody else in the committee have anything they'd like to raise before we adjourn this morning? I'd like to thank you all. I know we go through these, there's a lot of questions, there's a lot that goes on, and there's a lot of time and effort that everybody on the committee puts into this. So the effort and the lift does not go unnoticed. So just personally, thank you all for this.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you, Kristen. Great job.
Thank you all for walking me through my first year of capital.
You did great, Kristen.
Yeah, Kristen, good job.
It was all because of you.
It's Dan. We'll give Dan the credit. He doesn't get enough credit for this, but does a pretty good job. All right. With that, happy holidays, everyone. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thanks, guys. Show of hands, all in favor. That's everyone. Thank you guys so much. Everybody have a great day.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.